Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Our Veterans and Their Stories. My name is Christine Shirley, and it's a pleasure to have you with us again. And it's an honor, an absolute honor for us to have with us Steve Berardo. Steve, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to start off today to talk to Steve a little bit about his military experiences. And first of all, I'd like to find out what made you decide to join the Navy?
I joined the Navy to stay alive.
Okay. Can you elaborate on that
And it almost killed me.
Oh my gosh.
I served in the Navy from 1967 through 1970. Excuse me, I graduated high school in 1965. And when you graduated high school back then, as soon as you turned 18, you got your draft notice and the report for your draft physical. And when that happened, if you didn't have a deferment, either an educational or a medical deferment, you pretty much were drafted almost immediately. And most of the people that were friends of mine that got drafted and all went infantry and went to Vietnam. I went to a technical school, 1-year technical school, be a certified draftsman. And then after I got out, so I had a deferment, and then after I had get finished and got my certificate, I worked for a consulting engineer. And while I was working with a consulting engineer, of course, I lost my deferment, so I knew I was going to be drafted, and I didn't want to go into the Army, and I didn't want to go into the infantry. And I used to, at lunchtime, go walk around. I was working out of Perth Amboy. I'd walk around and stop by the post office who had a Navy recruiter. Spoke to the Navy recruiter and decided I was going to enlist in the Navy because I thought it was a safer way to go than going in the Army and being in the infantry. So I enlisted. And I went to boot camp in February of 1967. I spent February, March, and April in boot camp in the Great Lakes. And talking to my recruiter, they guaranteed me that based upon my education and experience, I would be guaranteed a rating, which is the job you do as an illustrator draftsman. And I would also go in one pay grade higher than what you normally go in. I went in as an E2, and I went in as what they call a designated striker, which guaranteed me an illustrator draftsman position. So I went to boot camp and went through boot camp, and at the end of boot camp, you go for an interview, and they tried to convince me at the interview. They said to me, you're more qualified to be an engineering aide.
So what exactly is that?
An engineering aide is a CB. Have you heard of the CB's?
Mm-hmm.
Construction Battalion? So I said to the interviewer, well, I know that a CB is construction battalion, CB, and engineering aide is part of the CB, so now you're telling me I should look at doing that. However, I happen to know that the CBs are in Vietnam in front of the infantry. I joined the Navy not to be in the infantry, and now I would be in front of the infantry cutting down the jungles, so I don't think so. I think I'll stay with what I have, so I did.
Good for you.
And the interview went on, and they said, excuse me, they said, you have it made. I said, why is that? They says, well, there's only 200 in the whole Navy. Most of them are career, they're doing the whole career. There's only 200. But pretty much you guys that get into it now, you go to a shore duty station, you stay there 4 years, and then you get discharged, you get out. I said, oh, that's nice. And I got my orders. So well, 9 guys are happy because I went right to the aircraft carrier. So at the time, excuse me, I was going with my wife at the time. We weren't married, we were young, I said, well, the good news is I got an East Coast aircraft carrier, the USS Forrestal's 6th Fleet, Atlantic Fleet, and there had been no 6th Fleet going to Vietnam.
And this is
That's
the
USS Forrestal. It has a picture of the Forrestal. So I leave boot camp and I come home on leave, and then I got finished with leave. I reported to Norfolk, Virginia, which was the home port for the USS Forrestal. I report in, and it was out on a maneuver, so I reported into a transit barrack where I had to be, for a couple of weeks to wait on the ship to come back. And they announced, well, pack your bags because when that ship comes back, you're going to Vietnam. So this is wonderful. This is really working out as I had not had planned. So we leave for Vietnam. It took us a month to get there because we could not fit through the Panama Canal, so we had to go around Cape of Good Hope, around Africa, so it took us a month to get there, at which time we passed over the equator, which had us all become official shellbacks.
This is beautiful. This is just...
An official shellback is anyone that crosses the equator on a U.S. Navy ship. You become a shellback, you become an honorary member of King Neptune's royal court. King Neptune is the king of the seas, of all the seas. I think I have some pictures. It involves an initiation, and this is some of the pictures of the initiation. You are initiated, you go through garbage chutes, you wear all your clothes the day you're going across, inside out and backwards. You eat for breakfast spinach with chocolate sauce and things like that. But here's my commanding officer, my executive officer here. Everybody goes through it who's not been through. Before you go over, you're a polywog. After you go over, you become an official shellback. So we became official shellbacks.
How long is that initiation?
Oh, it takes a good half a day. There's a
half a
the
day?
royal baby is there with axle grease on his belly, and you have to, get your face rubbed into his belly, and then you're in different stages, different stations that you go through. So that's basically what this is for, and then they issue you this. On the way over, there's 5,000 people on the ship, roughly. And on the way over, there was maybe 4,900 polywogs and maybe 100 shellbacks. We figured, if we can get these guys the night before and lock them up in some spaces, we'll get across the line without being initiated. Well, that didn't work.
It didn't happen.
But then the poor guys coming back, it was just the opposite. So that was
That's
that.
amazing.
And we get there, we get into Subic Bay, the naval base in the Philippines, and preparing to go on the line in the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam, in the war zone in Vietnam. I don't keep jumping around. We go out. We got on to the line on July 25th, 1967. On July 29th, we had the catastrophe, the mishap where we had the explosions and fire that we had happen. This shows you the magnitude of the fire that we went through, and I'll
Can
give you
you
some of the
describe
details. Yeah.
exactly what happened?
Yeah. What happened was the night before, on July 24th, at the time Lyndon Johnson was the president. And a lot of what we see today, our political leaders didn't learn from past experience. A lot of this is a repeat. What we're experiencing today is a repeat. Back then, Lyndon Johnson was escalating the Vietnam War. He was a Democratic president with a Republican Congress, so he could not get the funding from the Republican Congress to buy the munitions, the bombs, the ordnance that he needed to escalate the war, similar to what's happening now, So he went to his military leaders and he said, do we have any of this ordnance, these bombs and missiles and ordnance, anywhere stockpiled? And they said, yes, we do. They said, we have them in the Philippines, and they're in bunkers, underground bunkers. So he said, I want that sent out to the fleet. So on the evening of the 24th, the USS Diamond Head, which was an ammunition ship, brought this ordnance out to us, and we were going to unload it onto the ship. And our ordnance people and our captain looked at it and they said, we don't want to take this ordinance. This is World War II vintage ordinance, not Vietnam vintage ordinance. And it's been
What was the difference on that?
sitting in the heat, underground in the heat, deteriorating. That's the first thing. The second thing was that World War II vintage ordinance could not withstand the same hard ships that the Vietnam era could. For example, a Vietnam era bomb cook-off time was 3 minutes. Cook-off time is how long a bomb can be exposed to a flame before it will explode. Okay? World War II ordinance was half that time. And our ordinance people knew this. Okay? But we were ordered to take it. Even though our captain didn't want it and our ordinance people didn't want it, we were ordered, you have to take it. Realizing how volatile it was, our captain, our ordnance people decided they wanted to get it off the ship as fast as they could. So what they did was next morning we had a strike over North Vietnam scheduled for 7:30 in the morning. So they loaded all of this ordnance onto the planes that were gonna work that strike early in the morning, and they went and they had that, and everything went fine. The next strike was scheduled for 11 o'clock in the morning. So they loaded all those planes with all of this ordnance to get rid of the rest of the ordnance. All of the planes were on the flight deck, lined up on the flight deck, on the aft end, and we had 4 catapults, 2 off the front of the ship and 2 off the angle deck of the ship so they could launch 4 planes. We would be able to launch a plane approximately every minute and a half. Well, our squadron people wanted to be able to launch planes faster. So what they did was the planes had 2 safety systems built into them so that nothing would happen during this startup period. One was an electrical jumper, which in case of an electrical surge would take the electrical surge out when they were getting the planes up and ready. The other one was a mechanical pin. What the people on the flight deck did was to speed up being able to launch the planes, they disconnected ahead of time the electrical jumper because that was the one that would take more time to do, thinking they were okay with the mechanical pin because it was a two-fold, so they had the mechanical pin. What we come to find out later, and they didn't realize then, the mechanical pin in this plane had a defect.
Oh, no.
So what had happened was, I was sleeping at the time. I was working nights. I was getting off at 8 o'clock in the morning. This happened at 10 minutes to 11 in the morning with the scheduled launches to start at 11 a.m. We woke up to general quarters, and they told us once we were in the war zone, if you hear a general quarters, it's not a drill, it's the real thing. So we were asleep. We woke up to general quarters, explosions, fire. I was 7 decks down below the flight deck. Woke up to that, okay, not knowing what was going on, but to back up a little, what was happening that we didn't know at the time, to start the engine on a jet plane, they would hook it to a generator. You don't have to do that now, but you had to do it then. And these generators were on a cart the size of about like a golf cart. They'd bring the generator to the plane, start the engine, and then once the engine was running, these planes were all manned with the pilots because they were going to be launched. The pilot would flip a switch in the cockpit and take the power from the generator to the plane so he would control it. Well, on the starboard side of the ship, when he flipped the switch, there was a stray voltage and it fired a rocket on the flight deck.
Oh, my God.
It fired across the flight deck and it hit the fuel tank of John McCain's plane. John McCain was a pilot at the time, a lieutenant commander, okay? Most people will say to me, were you on that ship when it happened? I said, yeah, and the next question I'll ask, is it true that John McCain was the fault of that? No, that's not true, okay? He was the first victim. His fuel tank was the first one split open. You can see a video of this because there's a photographer's mate on the island, a piece of the ship that's above the flight deck, photographing this with a plat camera, big TV camera, because you didn't have what we have today. And you can see all of this, okay? And what he did was he stayed up there videoing this, okay, until it got so bad that he had to leave, and he locked the camera on so the camera was running, okay? You see the rocket fire, you see it hit, splits open a fuel tank, the fire starts. Our initial firefighting crew that was up on a flight deck at the time, 3 guys, a guy by the name of Gerald Farrier, he was a career man. He was on a 20-pound CO2 extinguisher. He knew he had pilots in the planes. He was trying to make his way to the planes to get the pilots out of the planes.
Did they get them all out?
Some of them, yeah. He's making his way, and you see on the video, he's sweeping the fire, okay? Because the fuel had spilt and the jet fuel caught fire. So he's making his way, and behind him are 2 guys on a 2.5-inch fire hose protecting him with water, okay? Well, he knew, I guess, from experience, he had 3 minutes to put this fire out. But as I said, the World War II ordinance could only last a minute and a half, which he didn't know. In a minute and a half, the first bomb goes off, the camera shakes, comes back on, and the only thing there was the fire hose. Those 3 guys were the first victims, okay?
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
They've since named a firefighting school that everyone must attain a much more advanced fire school. Everybody has to attend it. They named it after him. It's the U.S. Navy Gerald Farrier Firefighting School. But
Did you know him at all?
no, I mean, you know, I didn't. At the time, I was temporarily assigned to duty. I was a mess cookie. And that's where I was working at the time, 7 decks down. But what had happened was...
Did you tell me you got hit by shrapnel?
Yeah. What happened was, in the first 10 minutes of the fire, we had 9 1,000-pound bombs explode on the flight deck.
Oh, Lord.
And here's a picture of a bomb hole.
This one?
The flight deck was 3-inch thick armored steel. But in 10 minutes, we had 9 of them go off, and they blew holes like this in the flight deck, large enough to drop a car through. That's how big the holes were. And what happened was subsequent bombs fell into these holes, fell below decks. Most of the people that were killed below deck, right under the flight deck, because they worked on the flight deck, so they were in their berthing sleeping. That's the list of the people that were killed. There were 134 people killed.
Oh,
Another approximately 200 were injured, okay? So, as I said, I was sleeping, woke up to the general quarters, and where I was sleeping, there were racks, bunks, and it was like here, with 3 here high, 3 there, and a walkway, and here was a door to a head. Bathroom, okay? So we woke up to these explosions, and where we were sleeping was the full width of the ship, and guys were running in this direction from the starboard side, the right side of the ship, to the port side of the ship toward us, screaming for us to get out, there's fire, it's coming this way, get out. Well, we got up, and you're like in a daze, you're sleeping in skivvies, and you're trying to find your work pants to put them on, and with that, I turned this direction, and as I turned, the head blew off, the door blew off the head.
Wow.
And that's when I got a piece of shrapnel from that explosion. Subsequently, come to find out, there were 8 guys killed in that head when that happened. But, so we were, by this time they were calling Condition Zebra, which Condition Zebra is they lock everything down because they were pumping so much seawater to fight the fires on the flight deck that the below level compartments were filling with water. Okay, so they call a Condition Zebra and you're locked in. I mean, you can't get out, right? So I was trapped with another one of my shipmates who...
Well, wasn't that pretty dangerous, being trapped like that? I mean,
Yeah.
really.
Oh, yeah. You'll drown.
Yeah.
So I was with a shipmate who, while we were on our way, his wife had her first baby. And he lost it. I'm never going to see my baby. I'm going to die. We're going to die down here. I'm never going to see my kid. And, and he was falling apart, And meantime, we're trying to see what we could do to get out from here. And as we're making our way, the word came down. They said that our sick bay, which could handle approximately 50 people, was overwhelmed with casualties, with injured. So they said what they're doing is they are converting the forecastle. The forecastle is the long name is the forecastle. The forecastle is where the anchor chain is stored. It's up to the bow of the ship, and it's a gigantic open space. So they said they're turning that into a sick bay. Grab what you can grab in the way of bedding, pillows, sheets, whatever you can grab, and get it up to the forecastle right away, so we can use that as a temporary sick bay. So I said to this friend of mine, this is our chance to get out. We got to get above this water line. If this ship is going down, I don't want to be down below decks. So we gathered up what we could, and we made our way to the forecastle and got it up there, and and we were able to get above the water line. And being we were temporarily assigned to duty, we ran into another guy that was in our regular division. My regular division was called the IOIC, which was the Integrated Operational Intelligence Center. And it's where pilots were briefed and debriefed. And that's where the draftsmen were assigned, because back then you didn't have PowerPoint, and so you made graphics. So there were only about 30 of us. There were draftsmen, there were photo intelligence people, there were computer people. At the time a computer was the size that would fill a room, it wasn't like today with a laptop. So as we're making our way back down after we got this bedding up, this friend of ours from our regular division says, "You were the last two guys from the division.
Oh my
Everybody
God.
else was accounted for except you two. We didn't know what happened to you two." And he said, "Well, the rest of the division is on a weather deck. It's called a sponson. It's a weather deck exposed to the outside, which makes sense because if the ship was going to go down, you figured you had your best chance if you were on a weather deck to get off of it." So we were the last ones, and we made it there. And one of the things too that our captain did that kind of saved us, as this ship, the rest of the fleet came to us. This is a shot that another carrier took from 10 miles away. That's what it looked like 10 miles away. Okay. That was taken by the USS Oriskany. But what happened was, as this was happening, the rest of the fleet came around us to help fight the fire. This picture here shows one of the destroyer escorts next to us. That ship, this aircraft carrier, had a 30-degree list to port. A 30-degree list on an aircraft carrier is the maximum list that it can withstand before it capsizes. And we were there. So our captain realized this. Okay, so what he did was, we were a conventional powered ship, which meant that we were powered by diesel fuel. So we carried a ton of diesel fuel. So he immediately ordered the diesel fuel from the port side tanks to be transferred to the starboard side tanks, because it was a massive amount of fuel, and when they transferred that, it would bring the ship back upright. So he saved that ship from capsizing by doing that, okay? Does he get credit for it? No.
No?
They tried to make him a scapegoat. I'll get into that with you too.
This is
Okay.
terrible.
They tried to make him a scapegoat. This goes back in history. The USS Indianapolis, do you know that story?
Yes, yes.
Same thing happened. They tried to make that captain a scapegoat. What saved him in his court-martial was the Japanese captain that torpedoed him came and testified in his behalf. They were going to court-martial him for not zigzagging. And they questioned the Japanese captain and said, if he would have zigzagged, would it have made any difference? And the Japanese captain said, no, it wouldn't have made any difference. He would have been sunk anyway. So they tried to use him as a scapegoat. You kind of find out as you go through this, our government, whenever there's a mishap like this, looks for a scapegoat. They did it with the Indianapolis. They did it with the Forrestal. They did it with the Pueblo, with the Pueblo incident. They did it with the USS Pueblo. They looked for a scapegoat. So they tried to blame this on our captain. Okay, our captain at the time was the rank of captain besides being the captain of the Forest Law. And he was scheduled to be promoted to admiral, and then he was going to be made the commander of the 7th Fleet Carrier Division with his promotion. Well, after all this happened in the investigation, he was promoted to admiral, but there were certain people above him that didn't really like him. So he got transferred to Iceland, and they ended his career.
Oh,
But he did go
terrible.
out as an admiral. So, but the investigation went on. There was a committee. There was an admiral named Massey who interviewed parts of the crew, guys that were on the crew, reviewed the films, and he says, you know, it was a regular committee. This went on for a couple of years, this investigation. He says, we can't figure this out because everybody that we interview that was there is telling us the same story. The rocket fired from the starboard to the port side and from the aft to the forward of the ship. We're watching the video and we're seeing just the opposite. We're seeing the rocket fire from the port side to the starboard side and from forward to aft. We can't figure this out because everybody's telling us the opposite. They studied and studied and studied and tore it apart and reopened it and reclosed it and reopened, and they finally figured out what was going on. There was a plexiglass shield involved to protect
Oh.
everything. They were looking at a reflection and they were seeing everything backwards. So they finally, figured that out, and that's what they came up with.
Thank God, thank
Okay.
God. But did they have to remove the airplanes?
We wound up pushing ordnance over the side because a lot of the ordnance was stored up there because it was going to be loaded on these planes and the next planes out. Wound up pushing ordnance over the side. We wound up pushing planes over the side.
How many planes were?
There were probably, I'm guessing maybe 30 or so planes that were pushed over the side because they were loaded with ordnance. They were going to be involved in this fire, So, the captain gave orders, pushed them over, so that's what was happening. I mean, I'm guessing I wasn't an aviation guy. I was what they call ship's company. Ship's company, you're assigned to the ship all the time. It's about 2,000 of you. When you go out to sea, they bring the squadrons on. These are the guys with the planes, okay? And there's several squadrons that come on with all the planes. They fly out once you get out to sea, and their people come, which is why they're right under the flight deck, because each plane probably has a crew of 6 or 8 guys that maintain the plane. So each plane, they bring on another 3,000 people, and that's where you get the 5,000 people from. Okay, and then when everything's over, they fly back. Most of them are stationed in a base in Pensacola, Florida, and they fly back out. Which is why when we came back, I was ship's company. I lived on the ship. The ship came back. We were in dry dock for a year. We lived on it in dry dock, okay, for the year as ship's company.
And that was in Florida? Where did you live on it? In Florida?
Norfolk was our home. It was actually in dry dock in Portsmouth, Virginia. So what they did was they brought us back. We were on the line for 4 or 5 days, going through all of this and recovering bodies. Most of the bodies were so severely burned that they were beyond recognition, and they did not enforce us to wear dog tags.
Oh.
Dog tags were very uncomfortable, and they were noisy. They would dig into you, so most of us didn't wear dog tags on the ship. The 8 guys that were burned all got in the shower, and they huddled up and they turned the showers on, but the showers turned to steam immediately. They were burned together. The people responsible to go in and get them were corpsmen, enlisted people like us. They went in, they separated the bodies. They put them in litters. The litter looks like a wire stretcher. And then they would call us, take these litters and take them up to the hangar bay. The hangar bay was a temporary morgue, and people would ask me as they interviewed me, well, why did you have to do it with all those people? Because you were in the area that was affected. These guys brought the body out, you were there, grabbed the stretcher, so you did what you had to do because you were there,
Right.
you know.
So So did they ever identify?
Well, what they did was we
Bodies?
would carry they brought in body bags from the rest of the fleet and put them up on our bay. Our hangar bay deck became a temporary morgue, and the corpsmen would unload them and the bodies and put them into body bags, and then the dental technicians, hygienists, which were enlisted guys, were trying to identify the bodies through the dental records.
Work.
Right. So we came back into the naval base in Subic Bay, and we were in there having temporary repairs done on a ship, enough to get us back to our home port in Norfolk, Virginia. So these are things that some of the people that interview us can't believe either, because what they did was, the area that I was in was completely burned out, so we weren't allowed in that area. It was cordoned off, taped off. I went back to my regular division. We lost everything. We lost all of our clothing, because you move in there with all your belongings.
Right.
The people in my regular division got together, and one guy, hey, I got a brand new toothbrush I never used here. I have a toothbrush. I got a brand new shirt. Have my shirt. Take my whatever. And that's how we got by, because they gave us stuff. As this went on, though, the rumor came back to us, the yard workers that were in Subic Bay in the Philippines working in the yards were ransacking the lockers where we were. And that, people had interviews, I can't believe it, these people were sent in to help you, and they're ransacking. Yeah. I says, and they were looking, because you had cameras with you. They're going through trying to get your camera, anything of value. So I don't know if I should say this, but we snuck in at midnight to get our valuables out of there.
Good for you.
What we could do. So, we were there a week or two, whatever it was, I don't remember exactly. But the other side of that is that my fiance at the time knew, because this all hit the news, that the forest all blew up, there's mass casualties. They went 3 weeks not knowing if we were dead or alive, because you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have internet, you had no way of communicating with them to tell them you were still alive. So finally what they did, they made arrangements with ham radio operators. The ham radio operators were able to tie phone calls in with the ham radios, and we were able to call home. And
oh, thank God for that.
like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we made a call, not realizing that it was 3 o'clock in the morning here, waking our people up, telling them I'm alive.
Well, I'm sure they were really happy to know that. Oh my God.
So they did.
What did they say to you? I mean,
They were relieved. They went 3 weeks without knowing.
yeah.
And what they did was, the local media, WCTC radio and the home news, put 3 families together, guys that I didn't know. One was from Old Bridge, one was from Franklin Township. They put the families together, knowing that all 3, we didn't know each other because we didn't work at the same jobs.
Right.
And they would contact, did you hear from anybody, did you hear? And they were in touch the whole while.
Oh,
okay,
nice,
we became
yeah.
very good friends after the fact.
Nice.
Okay, to this day. One is passed, but we're very good friends. Because while we were back, we were commuting back and forth while we were in Dry Dock. Every week we'd come up for the weekend and then go back to Norfolk, back and forth. We became very good friends. Our wives all knew each other before we were married, when we were single, so the women all knew each other. We became very close, After they did temporary repairs on the ship to get us back to the States, we started back to the States to go back to our home port in Norfolk. And what they did was they made arrangements for us on an aircraft carrier. Your defense mechanism is your planes. Your planes is what defends your ship. We had no defense because we had gigantic holes in the flight deck. We couldn't launch any planes. Our gun mounts that we had were melted from the fire. So what they did was, at the time, you had the 7-day war, Egypt and Israel, and the fleet, the 5th fleet that was fighting that war, was trapped because the Suez Canal was closed down. So they were in the Mediterranean, but they couldn't get back to the States because the canal was closed and they couldn't carry enough fuel to come around Africa to get back. So they made arrangements for us to meet with them because we could carry a ton of fuel, and they would be our defense mechanism, the destroyers and so forth, and we would be their fuel supply, and then they came back to the States with us. And we got into the States. That's how we got back. But what they did was, on the way back, they pulled us into Mayport, Florida. There was a Naval Air Station in Mayport, Florida. They pulled us in there before we got to Norfolk to cover up some of the damage. They had us paint. They didn't want it to look so bad when we pulled into our home port. So they had us paint over some of the burned out areas and cover some of the melted mounds and stuff like that. And then we got into Norfolk and, you know, our home port. And then from there we went into the dry dock. But there's a letter here. You have that letter?
It's on this side.
We were all given a letter of commendation. Okay, this is the letter of commendation. This is kind of funny too, this letter of commendation that we got.
And why was it funny? Why do you say
I'll
it's
tell you why it's
I
funny.
don't want to know.
Because it says, you know, you will not be forgotten for your heroism, your courage, your, you know, what you did, what you went through. I mean, here you can read it. It's what it says, and you won't be forgotten. You won't be forgotten.
Hereby, look at sorry, it's okay. Yeah, it's a wonderful letter here.
Yeah, but let me tell you what makes it funny. Because you won't be forgotten for what you did. We got back, and once everything was done, we got back to our home port. We were in the naval base in Norfolk was our home base. And being a carrier, we were at Pier 12, which was the biggest pier so that a carrier could fit in it.
Right.
And it was also the farthest one from the main gate of the base. So we're on Liberty one night, and we're running late, and we're getting back. We get to the main. They had a bus that used to run around the base and take you to the piers, okay? So we get back to the main gate, and the bus is there. So, oh, great, we get on the bus. What ship you guys on? The Forrestal. Sorry, the bus don't go that far. So you won't be forgotten. But the first time we asked them for something,
You can't get there.
sorry, the bus don't go that far.
Oh my.
Typical.
So what did you do?
We hoofed it back.
Hoofed it back.
Hoofed it
Oh my
back.
God. Wow.
You know?
And you have a certificate.
Yeah, I
Oh,
mean,
this
that
is-
people, you know, when John McCain left the military and started running for political office, of course, the propaganda was, oh, he caused that problem on that ship. He was the reason 134 guys were, which is why everybody, the second question they ask you, is that true? No, it's not true. It's propaganda because he's running for political office,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So anyway, there's a certificate that
It says
John
you-
McCain flew a flag in my behalf over the U.S. Capitol building in honor of me for serving on the USS Forrestal. I didn't bring the flag, but I brought the plaque.
It's nice. It's
That is
beautiful. September 12th, 2012.
That was my birthday, but I was a little younger then.
Oh, nice. That is so nice.
So he flew the flag for me.
So you were on the Forrestal for 1 year?
Yeah,
For 1 year?
approximately a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time?
Well, yeah, let me tell you too. There's some little pieces I'd like to interject
Oh,
here that people
absolutely.
in here. One of the short stories is, you know, we probably had a few suicides on the way over. People couldn't deal with having to go there. Committed suicide on the way over.
This is going to Vietnam.
On the way over. There was a rumor we had an ejection, a guy ejected in the hangar bay. They were working on a plane and he got caught up in the ejection mechanism and ejected and became pizza on the ceiling. We also had somebody running around for a while, 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning, going to the life jacket lockers, pulling a life jacket. They all had a strobe on them, lighting the strobe and throwing it overboard. Call a man overboard. When they had a man overboard, everybody, all 5,000 people, had to muster within minutes to decide who went over, at which time they were launching a helicopter and a lifeboat to go out and look for this guy that went over. Well, you had this guy that was throwing life jackets, so all they were rescuing was life jackets.
Oh, no.
This went on for, I don't know, a week and a half, and it was always 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning. So finally the captain came on, the whole system, and announced, we don't know who's doing this, but I'm going to tell you right now, because the first thing they do on a man overboard is they launch the copter and the boat, and they cut the engines, because if you go overboard, you're going to go right through the
Right.
propellers. So he says, we don't know who's doing this, but I'm going to tell you right now, Next time, we're not stopping. So you better hope that the next life jacket that goes over doesn't have somebody in it. And then it stopped. Okay. Another little incident that you don't realize, you're basically living on the city. You're living with people that are just like living in the same wackos you have running around a city you have running around.
Okay.
Okay. We were told when we report to the ship for about a week, you're in a temporary holding division until you go to your permanent division. There's maybe 30 of you. And you're there for about a week until you all go to your regular working division. And they said, we've got to tell you guys, be aware, there's somebody running around at night trying to stab people in their sleep.
Oh my God.
Just be aware. So these are things that,
Wow.
kind of come
Wow.
up, right?
Just this picture of you.
So,
Here you are.
yeah.
Here's that handsome fella. There he is right here.
Wouldn't know it's me, would you?
I think you look pretty close. I know you had a couple of stories you told me about.
Yeah, so also one of the things that happened while we were in this holding division, you'd gather up in a group of 25, 30 people to have your mail given to you. And they'd have mail call. You'd be in a group, and they'd call you Berardo, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And they call us, I'm not going to mention his name, they'd call us one name, and they says, get over here. And he comes up, what's the problem? Nobody knew what was going on. He says, get this letter with a return address from the U.S. Congress. What are you doing communicating with the U.S. Congress? They didn't like any of that. They want you. Why are you getting mail from the U.S. Congress? I mean, they didn't open it. They just saw the return address. Well, I'll tell you the way it is. It's my father.
That's what he said.
So it turns out he got very preferential treatment from that point on because his father was a congressman.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's something. It's amazing. Now you told me there was a couple of YouTube videos on the Forrestal and the accident.
One of them is called Trial by Fire. That's about a 40-minute, and it's all first-hand live footage.
So it is.
And it's very accurate. Trial by Fire. And the other one is called Situation Critical, which is right on the money. That's about a 20-minute.
Is that also actual footage?
Yeah.
I gotta leave that.
Our flag fell down. Hi. But those are two very accurate, very accurate. There's also a book that's been written. It's called Sailors to the End, written by a guy by the name of Gregory Freeman. And there were several authors that came. There was an association started after all this called the Forrestal Association.
Thank you, Neil.
Which was all ex-crew members, and then, they'd have reunions and things like that, and authors would come to this group asking about writing a book, and the association finally decided to let Gregory Freeman do it because they felt as though he was going to do the right job, and he did. He interviewed several people, or not more than several, a bunch of people, and decided to write a book, and it is the most accurate, true, on-the-money book written.
And what was the name of the book again?
Sailors to the End.
Sailors to the End.
And the reason it's called Sailors to the End is during this fire, they lost steering on the bridge. They had to steer it from a steering compartment below an aft deck, and you had port and aft steering. They had to transfer the steering manually, from the port side to the aft side. There were 3 guys in the compartment down there to transfer it. They were trapped in the compartment. And they knew they were trapped, and they were in communication with their officer on the quarterdeck, back and forth, and the officer knew that they were not going to get out. But they stayed in there, and one at a time they were all killed. And that's why the book is named Sailors to the End.
So, I know we talked a little bit about, I think we got ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I wanted to find out, you mentioned about mothballs.
There was when I first met you and you told me about this, I went to a video. I thought it was yours, but it wasn't. And it just happened to be that the video that I picked, the YouTube video, was a guy that basically did what I did, joined the Navy to stay alive, and he went to see a recruiter. And because he had had prior experience and education as I had, they told him, we'll make you a draftsman. And you'll go in the Navy as a draftsman. We'll send you to A school, which is the highest school there is to be educated in this. They didn't offer me that because they said, we're not gonna send you to school for something you already know. But they guaranteed me the job. So this guy tells a story, right? He says he gets up with this guarantee that he was gonna go to A school to be a draftsman and, so he goes to boot camp and the indoctrination, the guy that's given it says, we have a few things to tell you. And so one of the things we want to tell you is that there's no more A school for draftsmen. Well, you come to find out that the uniforms, when you go to boot camp, before they're issued, they're stored in mothballs. And they smell like mothballs. So the brand new guys that are just getting them really stand out smelling like mothballs, and everybody else can tell that they're brand new guys because they smell like mothballs. So this guy's going, oh man, I was promised this school, I was promised to be a draftsman. And the guys that had been here a while all started to chant, mothball, mothball, don't be blue. Our recruiter screwed us too. My recruiter lived up to his end of it. It's just that everything that happened to me was by chance the wrong way. But he lived up to it. I went in as an illustrator draftsman, one pay grade higher. But I'll tell you what happened to me, and this is something you don't realize either. They had probably 10 illustrator draftsmen were on the ship. They needed 2, okay? They only had room for 2 to work, okay? The reason they kept us, and you kind of realize this as things go on, okay? The reason they kept approximately 10 of us when they needed 2 is because the lowest ranking people get assigned to do the baloney work that nobody else wants to do. When you run out of the low-ranking guys, they got to start moving up the ladder. I mean, they're not going to be cleaning the tables and mopping the floors, but they're going to be supervisors. So nobody wants to be taken out of their regular job. And they knew that the illustrator draftsman guys were not going to make rank because there was only 200 in the Navy, and they weren't going to be promoted. We'll keep these guys. We'll send them to do all. You go from being a mess cook to a whole duty painting and chipping to a compartment cleaner. You get all of the baloney work, okay? But you come to realize this is why they're doing it, So what had happened to me was I was on the ship for a year and I was becoming eligible for shore duty for a transfer. So they have a list that they post. It's called Shore Bay, Sea Bay. It's a list that goes on a wall and it's a list of people that are going to be transferred. So there's a big line, the list is up and go up to the line and I'm up front of the line reading this and I read my name. I'm due for a transfer. Hallelujah, I'm due for a transfer. A guy behind me goes to me, that's pretty good. You've been here a year, you're going to shore duty. I've been here 20 years and I'm still on the ship. My name ain't on the list. I said, that's because you decided to be a bosun mate. Where are they going to put a bosun mate on shore duty?
Cool.
So, I get transferred. I put in, of course, I lived in New Jersey. I put in for Bayonne, Earl, and Washington, D.C. You get 3 choices. I get my orders and I'm getting transferred what they considered Washington, D.C. And actually it was in Maryland, but it was considered what was called the Naval Reconnaissance and Technical Support Center, NERTC. It was very similar to what we were doing on the ship.
So did you need any secret clearance for that?
Yeah, well what happened was, I'll tell you about that too. We get there, well first of all I'm home on leave. And I'm, a few days into my leave, and a good friend of mine calls me from the ship. I'm home here, and he says to me, you better get down here. I said, why? He said, they're trying to cancel your orders. You're not here to defend yourself. They want to keep you on the ship. They're trying to cancel your orders. So I go back to the ship, and what they were doing is they wanted to keep as many low-ranked people as they could. They were trying to get them canceled, but I was able to defend myself, and I got the transfer.
Good for you.
So I get transferred, I go report in, and by that time I had made rank, okay, because I had taken the test 3 times, passed it 3 times. I had Vietnam service, which was another credit, so I report in and I went to work and, then they had a division that handled specialty intelligence work, and they said to me, we'd like you to come to work for this special division because it requires a very high clearance. And it costs us a lot of time and a lot of money to get this very high clearance. So being you still have 2.5 years to do, we'd like you to get this clearance. So I did. I come home for a weekend, and I, being Italian descent, I lived in an Italian neighborhood. My aunt lived here, my other aunt lived here, my uncle lived here, my cousin lived here. I come home on a weekend, and my aunt says to me, "What did you do?" I said, I didn't do anything. What do you mean, what did? The FBI was here. She says, they knocked on my door and they said to me, do you know Steve Murray? Yeah, it's my nephew. Oh, never mind, we won't speak to you. And because they were related, they wouldn't interview them.
They couldn't interview
because they were related
yeah.
to me. But yes, it required a very high clearance. And then when I got the clearance, I went to this other division, and the officer in charge interviewed me. So I'm going to tell you. He says, you got a 6-man shop down there. He says, you're going to be in charge. I'm going to be in charge of the shop. I just got here. I said, yeah, but you're the senior man. He says, and as long as things go smoothly and I have no complaints, do what you want to do what you got to do.
So what did you do there?
Well, there was like 6 of us, but after a couple of months there, I kind of figured out we only needed 5 to do the job, so we went on a 4-day week. There was one guy off each week, we rotated
nice.
around, But we did the work, and
And what type of work did you do?
it was intelligence work, the
Intelligence
same
work.
type of stuff we were doing on the ship, but from shore duty, same type of work, yeah. Yeah, but even that, it was a very similar work to what we were doing on the ship, and I always tell people the job I had, I got married while I was there, my wife moved down there and we lived there for 2.5 years. The job I had when I was in Washington was the best job I ever had, comparing none.
Wow.
I says it was great. You went from being on a ship to standing duty every other day to standing duty when I was in Washington every 24 days, once a month.
Nice.
And you worked a regular 8-hour day, whatever, 8 to 4 or 7 to whatever it was, It was a great job, But, we would wear uniforms. Civilians worked with us side by side in civilian clothes, but when I first got there, before I was married and before we had an apartment, I lived on an Air Force base, and we used to travel back and forth from the Air Force base to the outskirts of D.C. into Maryland, where the building was that we worked, and it was a parkway. It was called the Suitland Parkway. It looked very much like the Garden State Parkway, where you had rolling hills, grass hills, going up to trees. And they came to us one day and they said, for the next couple of weeks, don't wear your uniform to work, wear civilian clothes. Why? There's a sniper in the trees waiting for people to go by. So I said, these are all things you don't hear. And he's looking for people to drive by in uniform, and he's taking pot shots at them.
Wow. But he never shot at you. Oh my gosh.
Until they got him.
We've had a really, really interesting
Career.
Really do. Any other family members in the service?
My brother was in the Army. My brother's quite a bit older than me. He passed very young, quite a while ago, very young. But he was in the Army, but he never left the States. He was worked in guided missiles and stuff. He was outside of Baltimore. I can't think of the name of the base. He was down there. Yeah. He did 2 years, a 2-year draftee. It was during the Korean War, but he stayed in the States. Yeah.
And your dad?
No, my father was too young for World War I and too old for World War II, but my father was a paid firefighter at Camp Kilmer.
Oh, nice.
As a civilian.
Wow,
yeah.
very nice,
yeah.
very nice.
Yeah.
He did service too. Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because as I was going through the VA and things, I got involved with going through the system, and I was talking to a counselor, and he was taking down information. I had a first cousin who was in World War II. And I was in for an interview one time, and he was writing down information. He gave me the information. He wrote my phone number down wrong. So I said to my wife, she was in the car, I said, I got to run back in. I said, you got the wrong phone number. So I go back in, and he said, let me open up the computer. Brings up the computer. He says, I have 2 Berardos in here. I said, do? I said, who else do you have? And he told me, and it was my first cousin. He worked with my first cousin during World War II times to get him through all of what he needed to go through to get his VA benefits. And it was just a coincidence that all these years later, and he was from North Bergen or Jersey City, somewhere over there when he got out, and he went through all of that, and he was struggling. He was a gunner on a destroyer, and he was the guy firing the gun, and he had 2 guys on each side of him feeding the rounds of
ammunition.
Bullets, and those 2 guys were killed, and he wasn't.
Oh my
and he
God.
had a hard time with that.
Sorry. You also have medals.
Yeah.
And can you show us on your phone?
I received, the Vietnam Service Medal. I mean, we didn't get both of them because you had to be on ground to get one of them, and of course, we were not on ground. But I have a picture of them here. This is the medals. This is the National Defense Medal here, which
Is it this
everyone gets for serving in the
Sure.
military.
Here's a big shot of it. I'm trying to.
Everybody gets that medal for serving. And then the next one over is the Vietnam Service Medal. For being in Vietnam, you get the Vietnam
A
Service
little bit
Medal.
bigger picture of it.
And then the next one is a Distinguished Service Medal. I don't think I do.
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, Distinguished Service. That's issued by the state of New Jersey.
Beautiful medals.
And then the state of New Jersey also issued you a Vietnam Service from the state, a Vietnam Service Medal. That's the 4 medals. This was my patch. The stripe is the E4 rating. The insignia was the illustrator draftsman with the triangle and the compass that shows your job and your rank. And this is a shoulder rocker that you wore on your shoulder of your uniforms.
So, would you have any advice for anybody that wants to join the military?
A lot of people ask, you should go to this one too. I told the people we'll be talking about tomorrow again. There's an Armed Forces Appreciation Day that's run by Monroe Township High School. That's one of the best.
In the state?
It's fantastic.
Oh.
It's run by the high school seniors, okay? I went last year, and there's probably 30 or 40 veterans there, and the kids, the senior class runs it. And all year long during their senior year, they raise money, okay? And they donate each year to a different organization, okay, of all the money they make. They sell T-shirts, they sell bake sales, and they have this affair. What they do is, an hour before it starts, they have a breakfast of bagels and coffee, and you sit in a room and you have bagels and coffee. And the staff of the high school encourages these high school kids to go sit at the table with you. Ask them questions. We want them to know your stories.
Nice.
We don't want them to forget your stories.
Nice.
Sit at the table and talk. So they do. Me and another guy there, and 2 girls came up, and they were sitting there talking, and one girl says to me, I'm thinking about joining the military. She says, would you recommend any branch? It's probably the safest branch would be the Coast Guard. That's probably the safest branch, so, and they ask different questions, and then you go into the auditorium. They have a full-blown presentation. They have the senior class kids split up into different groups, maybe 20, 30 kids in a group, and the Navy group wears a blue shirt with Navy, and the Marines wear a red one, and they carry a banner, and there's a band playing, and they're singing, and they march in, in formation, and then they have guest speakers, okay? And the one guest speaker was a younger teacher, okay, who was still working. But he tells his story. He says that one of the years the kids came to him and his wife became very ill, and they couldn't afford to pay their mortgage. So these kids donated the money for them to be able to pay their mortgage.
That's beautiful.
And then one year they gave it to Tunnel to Towers. Each year they pick a different organization, give it all to that. But they're doing it again this May.
Nice.
So
That's
Joe
nice.
Gucci's going to come with me to
Very
that.
nice.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys want to go because
Very
that was
nice.
very, very impressive. Very
So
impressive.
individually, what kind of advice would you give somebody? What do you think?
I'll tell you this, you and everybody will tell you this, you cannot experience anywhere in life what you experience in the military. You just cannot. It's unfortunate, I guess I was one of the, I don't think everybody goes through what I went through, And it's like, anything that could have gone wrong, and all of my plans went down the drain, everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. So all of my planning was kind of a waste. But like I said, I really enjoyed my 2.5 years in Washington, But there's a funny story there too, because we would have courier runs. I keep thinking of these little stories. In the courier run, we'd have to take classified material from one place, maybe to the Pentagon or something. Mm-hmm. And you'd have a car with a civilian driver, and in the back seat, you'd have an officer with a metal briefcase handcuffed to himself, and he had a 45 on his side, and then you had on either side of him an enlisted guy, me on one side and another enlisted guy on the other, and we carried nightsticks. So he stopped on the way to downtown Washington, D.C. in traffic, and the officer looks out and he goes, some real questionable character standing on that corner. What are you going to do if one of them comes over and grabs the handle on the car? What am I going to do? I'm going to run. I got a stick, you got a 45. I'm going to run.
That makes sense. Oh my gosh. Well, is there anything else you
Let
want to add?
me tell you my hitchhiking story. We're in
Oh,
port.
that's right. Yeah, you were going to say
We're
that.
in port now. And like I say, we'd come home every weekend. So, you'd get off on a Friday, you'd come home on a Friday, go back on a Sunday night to get back in time for Monday morning. Well, I had a very good friend, was a yeoman. The yeoman is in charge of mustering you in the morning, checking you off in the morning, right? So I would sneak out on Thursday. I would go to him and say, tomorrow morning you got me covered? Got you covered. Now, if anything happened to me, we were both going to hang. Me for sneaking out and him for checking me out, right? So I'm sneaking out, right? I have a friend in the division who had a motorcycle. It's cold now. This is January or February. It's brutal cold. I go to this friend with the motorcycle because we were in port. He kept the motorcycle there. I say, I'll give you $2. You take me to the on-ramp on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel and put me on the on-ramp so I can start my way home. Yeah, no problem, no problem. So, all right, so I had dress blues on, a ditty bag, with your overnight stuff. So, all right, we get on the motorcycle. Now, it was so cold. I'm behind him, right, so that the wind isn't hitting me. And we're riding. We finally get this. Okay, we're here. I get off the back of the motorcycle. I says, oh, man, you took me to the wrong bridge. This is not the Bay Bridge Tunnel.
Oh, no.
So I get back on. And we go. He says, all right, we're there. We get there, and it was right. I get on. Now I'm freezing. I'm shivering. I'm shaking. I'm so cold. So I'm hitchhiking on the ramp, right? Coming up the ramp is an armed forces police, more powerful than military police. Here comes a van, armed forces police. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, here I go. So he pulls up, and he looks at me and says, you want to ride? I said, yeah, get in. So I get in. He said, look like you're freezing. I said, I am. So he's blasting the heat. He says to me, I'll take you to the other side of the Bay Bridge Tunnel, but I got to turn off there. I'll let you off there. I said, that's fine. As far as you can take me, that's fine. So he lets me off. I'm hitchhiking again. Elderly couple picks me up, right? They take me up the road, and they said to me, we're going home to have dinner, but then we're going to go grocery shopping. If you're still out here, we'll pick you up again. I said, fine, fine. So I get out, and I'm hitchhiking again, making my way up Route 13 through Virginia. Here comes a Virginia State Police car. Now I'm thinking, oh man, what am I going to do? So I didn't do nothing, I stood there. The police car pulls over, and he opens the window, and he says to me, you want to ride? I said, yeah. I get in the car, and he's driving, right? And he's talking, where do you live, about, all of this, and we're talking. And as we're talking, he's looking in the rearview mirror. And we're talking, and he says to me, I got your ride. That's what are you talking about? You got me a ride. It's a car behind us with New Jersey license plates.
Oh,
So
wow.
he's trying to pull this guy over, and the guy's not pulling over, right? So he says, flips the lights on, and he pulls the guy over. So he says to me, you wait in the car, I'll go talk to the guy. I said, all right, fine. So he's talking to the guy, and he waves me over, right? So I go, he says, the guy says he's going to New Jersey, he'll take you. I said, oh, great, no, thank you. So I go up, and I open the back door of the car to throw my bag in the car. And in the back seat of the car, there's a Navy lieutenant's uniform hanging in the back seat. I'm thinking, oh my God. So I get in the front, and we're driving maybe an hour, hour and a half, and we're talking. And he says to me after maybe an hour, he says, I got to ask you, he says, what are you doing going home on a Thursday?
Uh-oh.
Liberty doesn't start. I says, oh, I'm going to be honest with you. Oh, they will. So he says to me, well, let's hope we don't get in an accident, because so am I. So it winds up that he dropped me off right at the door of my house.
Oh my God, that's so nice.
That's my hitchhiking story.
Wow. Wow, you couldn't have planned that. Seriously. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. Is there anything else that we left out?
I don't think so. I think that's a pretty long review, right?
Well, We want to really thank you so much, Steve, for coming on the show
Thank you.
and talking to our viewers and explaining all about your military history. It's quite an interesting history you had,
Thank you.
and thank God you're still alive. That's the other thing. And I want to thank all our viewers for watching us, and please be sure to stay tuned for our next show that we're coming up with. And if you'd like, you subscribe to us. We'd be very happy if you did. And to everyone, it's our 250th anniversary. So we thank God for the United States and America, and God bless America. Thank you all.
Thank you.